Well, welcome to today's Read Aloud. It's a first official Read Aloud. We had Spanish Read Aloud on Tuesday. We're going to have American Sign Language next Tuesday. But this is our first regular Read Aloud for spring quarter. And we have invited Susan Hanson from the OSU Veterans Learning Community. She's the director of it, and I'm going to turn this immediately over to her to introduce our guest today, who will be reading from Experiences at War. Why don't you take over, please?
Okay. So I'm Susan Hanson. I gave you the brochure so I wouldn't have to spend too much time telling you about the program. These four students were in last quarter's literature class in comparative studies. It was Comp Studies 308, and it is literature on the experiences of war. They're all veterans. I'll let them tell you as much or as little as they'd like to about themselves. Is anyone a veteran? Any of you? No? Okay, so the program actually was fairly new. We've only had classes. This is our second year of classes. And I think they can speak to sort of the importance to them to have a class that is exclusively veteran and military students, and to sort of engage with materials that have particular resonance with their own lives. So these are all texts that we worked with last quarter, and some selected the passages that were important. Some took my advice, and I think probably and would have objected if indeed it wasn't agreeable material. So I thought that it might be appropriate, I think, to start with an excerpt from Tim O'Brien. Right? This is a memoir, a Vietnam War memoir, and Jay McCoy is going to read from the chapter. It's chapter 16. It's called Wise Endurance, and it is the chapter where the memoirist sort of reflects on questions, ideas about courage and bravery. So, Jay McCoy, you want to tell them something about yourself briefly?
I guess like my statistics would be like I was in the Army. I was active duty for 8 years, and I did 3 tours overseas, twice to Baghdad and once to southeastern Afghanistan. Whatever it is, soldiering in war is something that makes a fellow think about courage. Makes a man wonder what it is and if he has it. Some say Ernest Hemingway was obsessed by the need to show bravery in battle. It started, they say, somewhere in World War I and ended when he passed his final test in Idaho. If the man was obsessed with the notion of courage, that was a fault. But reading Hemingway's war journalism and his war stories, you get the sense that he was simply concerned about bravery, hence about cowardice, and that seems a virtue, a sublime and profound concern that few men have. For courage, according to Plato, is one of the 4 parts of virtue. It is there with temperance, justice, and wisdom, and all parts are necessary to make the sublime human being. In fact, Plato says men without courage are men without temperance, justice, or wisdom. Just as without wisdom, men are not truly courageous. Men must know what they do is courageous. They must know it is right. And that kind of knowledge is wisdom and nothing else. Which is why I know few brave men. Either they are stupid and do not know what is right, or they know what is right and cannot bring themselves to do it. Or they know what is right and do it, but do not feel or understand the fear that must be overcome. It takes a special meaning. Courage is more than the charge, more than dying or suffering the loss of a love in sin, more than dying or suffering the loss of a love in silence or being cowed. It is temperament and more wisdom. Was the cow standing immobile and passive more courageous than the Vietnamese boys who ran like rabbits from Alpha Company's barrage? Hardly. Cows are very stupid. Most soldiers in Alpha Company did not think about human courage. They were malingerers in Alpha Company. Men who cared little about bravery. Shit, man. The trick of being in NAM is getting out of NAM. And I don't mean getting out in a plastic body bag. I mean getting out alive, so my girl can grab me so I'll know it. The malingerers manufactured some of the best, most persuasive ailments ever, some good enough to fool a skeptical high school nurse. When we walked through the sultry villas in sluggish, swollen land called Pinkville, the massive men in Alpha Company talked little about dying. To talk about it was bad luck, the ultimate self-fulfilling prophecy. Death was taboo. The word for getting killed was wasted. When you hit a bouncing Betty and it blows you to bits, you get wasted. Fear was taboo. It could be mentioned, of course, but it had to be accompanied with a shrug and a grin and an obvious resignation. All this took the meaning out of courage. We could not gaze straight at fear and dying, not at least while out in the field, and so there was no way to face the question. You don't talk about being a hero with a star pinned on your shirt and feeling all puffed up. The soldier couldn't understand when I asked him about the day he ran for his foxhole through enemy fire to wrap useless cloth around a dying soldier's chest. I reacted, I guess. I just did it. Did it seem the right thing to do? No, the doc said. Not right, not wrong either. Did you think you might be shot? Yes, I guess I did. Maybe not. When someone hollers for the medic, if you're a medic, you run toward the shot. That's it, I guess. But isn't there a feeling you might die? Doc had his legs crossed and was leaning over a can of sea rations. He seemed intent on them. No, I won't die over here, he laughed. Maybe I'll never die. I just wondered why I didn't feel anything hit me. Something should have hit me. There was so much firing. I sort of ran over, waiting for a kind of blast or punch in my back. My back always feels most exposed. Before the war, my favorite heroes had been make-believe men. Alan Ladd of Shane, Captain Weir, Humphrey Bogart as the proprietor of Cafe the American, Frederick Henry, especially Frederick Henry. Henry was able to leave war being good and brave enough at it for real love. And although he missed the men of war, he did not miss the fear and killing. And Henry, like all my heroes, was not obsessed by courage. He knew it was only one part of virtue, that love and justice were other parts. To a man, my heroes, before going to Vietnam, were hard and realistic. To a man, they were removed from other men, able to climb above and gaze down at other men. Bogey in his office, looking down at roulette wheels and travelers. Veer, elevated. The star, searching justice. Shane, loving the boy, detesting violence. Looking down and saying goodbye aboard the stocky horse. To a man, my heroes were wise. Perhaps Veer was an exception. But when he allowed Billy Budd to die, he was at least seeking justice, tormented by a need for wisdom, even honestness. But certainly Shane and Bogart and Henry had learned much and knew much, having gone through their special agonies. And each was courageous. Bogey, how could a man leave Ingrid Bergman, send her away, even for the most noble of causes? Shane, facing his villain, Veer, sending a stuttering blonde, purely innocent youth to the gallows. And especially Frederick Henry, talking with his love, Catherine Bartlett. You're brave. No, she said. But I would like to be. I'm not, I said. I know where I stand. I've been out long enough to know. I'm like a ball player that hits 230 and knows he's no better. What is a ball player that bats 230? It's awfully impressive. It's not. It means a mediocre hitter in baseball. But still, I'm a hitter. But still a hitter, she prodded me. I guess we're both conceited, I said, but you are brave. Henry and the rest of my hearers had been out long enough to know, experience no lives. Batting 230, realistic, able to speak the truth, conceited, never. And most strikingly, each of these hearers thought about courage, cared about being brave, and at least enough to talk about it and wonder to others about it. But in Vietnam, out of the villages of My Lai and My Kay, where the question of courage is critical, no one except Captain Johansson seemed to care. Not the malingerers, certainly. Not Arizona, the kid who was shot in the chest in his private charge. Not the doc. So when the time in my life came to replace fictional heroes with real ones, the candidates were sparse. And it was to be the captain or no. Looking at him, only a shadow rolled in a poncho, lying on his side asleep. I wondered what it was about him that made him a real hero. He was blonde. Heroes somehow are blonde in the ideal. He had driven racing automobiles as a civilian and had a red slab of scarred flesh as his prize. He had medals, one for killing the Viet Cong, a Silver Star. He was like Beer, Bogey, Shane, and Frederick Henry, companionless among herds of other men lesser than he, but still sad and humbled that he was not perfect. At least so it appeared. Perhaps other men, some of the troopers he had led, who were not so brave, died when he did not and should have by a hero's standard. Like my fictional pre-war heroes, Captain Johansson's courage was a model. And just as I could never match Alan Loud's prowess, nor Captain Beer's intensity of conviction, nor Robert Jordan's resolution to confront his own certain death, in Jordan's place, I would have climbed back on my horse, bad leg and all, and galloped away until I bled to death in the saddle. I could not match my captain, but still I found a living hero, and it was good to learn that human beings sometimes embody valor, that they do not always dissolve at the end of a book or movie reel. I thought about courage off and on for the rest of my tour in Vietnam. When I compared subsequent company commanders to Johansson, it was clear that he alone cared enough about being brave to think about it and try to do it. Captain Smith admitted that he was a coward using just that word. Captain Forsyth strutted and pretended, but he failed. On the outside, things did not change much after Captain Johansson. We lost about the same number of men. We fought about the same number of battles, always small little skirmishes. But losing him was like the Trojans losing Hector. He gave some amount of reason to fight. Certainly there were never any political reasons. The war, like Hector's own war, was silly and stupid. Troy was besieged for the sake of a pretty woman, and Helen, for God's sake, was a woman most of the grubby, born Trojans could never have. Vietnam was under siege in pursuit of a pretty, tantalizing, promiscuous, particularly American brand of government and style, and most devout the company would have preferred a likable warrior to self-determination. So Captain Johansson helped him mitigate and melt the silliness, showing the grace and poise of a man. The grace and poise a man can have under the worst circumstances. A wrong war, we clung to him. Even forgetting the captain, looking at myself, and the days I writhed insensible under bullets, and other days when I did okay, somehow shooting back, or talking coherently into the radio, or simply watching without embarrassment how the fighting went. Some of the futility and stupidity disappeared. The idea is manliness, crudely idealized. You liken dead friends to the pure of the eternal dead soldier. You liken living friends to the mass of dusty troops who have swarmed the world forever, and you try to find a hero. It is more difficult, however, to think of yourself in those ways, as the eternal Hector dying gallantly, it is impossible. That's the problem. Knowing yourself, you can't make it real for yourself. It's sad when you learn you're not much of a hero.
Thank you.